welcome back to Bowllan's blog. I'm here with Miss Joanne Walsh, the Hewitt School librarian, and she is going to wrap up Black History Month with 3 more picks, and then I will share with you my mailbag. So what do we have so far?
Again, found 3 books. These are biographies of 3 people. Like I told you, I like the people that not everybody heard about.
Yes.
And this one is called Bad News for Outlaws, The Remarkable Life of Bass Reeves. He was a deputy U.S. Marshal. He was born in slavery. According to the story, he was a very good shot and everything else, and he actually went with his owner into the Civil War. But then, according to the story, he got into a fight with his owner and hit him, so he hightailed it out to what was in the Indian Territory, was now Oklahoma. And after the war, Civil War ended, emancipation, he actually was hired as a U.S. Deputy Marshal for Judge Parker, otherwise known as the Hanging Judge. He served the longest of any U.S. Marshal in the Indian Territory, 32 years. While he was illiterate, he would have someone read him all of the warrants. He arrested somewhere like around, I think it was 1,000 or a little bit more men, women, and children, including his own son. They said he was as honest as the day was long, and most outlaws found out that Bass Reeves was after them. They either got out of Indian Territory or they turned themselves in.
That's incredible.
The illustrations are wonderful, and they use the words that they would have used back then, the vernacular, and there's a glossary in the back. And when I read it to the students, we had to stop a lot of times and explain the different words, but they got, a lot more words and everything else. And what's got me interested is Gary Paulson, the author, has also written a book about Bass Reeves, a historical novel about him. So now I'm going to read that one next.
That's fascinating.
Yeah.
Great title.
Great title. Yeah.
Appropriate.
Yes, absolutely.
Okay. Let's move this over here.
The next one is Maricha, I think it is, 19th Century American Girl by Tanya Bowllan. And this, I was fascinated with the book. It's, again, biography of a girl who was born in the 1840s in New York City, and it gives you such a glimpse into this whole vibrant black community of free blacks that were in New York prior to the Civil War. We all tend to think of everybody as being, enslaved, but she was in a family that was from Frederick Douglass came to visit her grandmother at one point. Her godfather was a man who went to Edinburgh to go to college and medical school and opened up one of the first interracial pharmacies on West Broadway in New York. Her family actually, again, it brings in the draft riots during in 1863, and they did have to leave New York. She was actually the first black person, but especially as a girl, to graduate from Providence High School in Providence, Rhode Island. Because the family went there, and she wanted to go to high school, and even then, it was segregated. This was right after the Civil War. And she went to court, and anything else, but it was fascinating.
Affluent family?
Fairly affluent. Her family ran a boarding house. I would say fairly affluent family. And the writer has actual pictures in here of the family. But then, and if you read the epilogue, it says that she also then found pictures that were true for that time period to, expand it. But the author found her, she had written a memoir, about 85 pages I think it was. And the author found this in the library, and that started her fascination with this person, and then did the research and everything else. But wonderful, wonderful book. Again, another part of history that most of us don't know about.
And the face.
The face, yeah.
Captivating.
Yeah.
Just the look when you see the picture.
That's
what struck me.
When Frederick Douglass was brought to see her grandmother on a visit, again, prior to the Civil War, and her grandmother said that because they ran a boarding house at one time, whenever he came into New York City, he would always find a place at her table a bed in her house, and clean linen.
And on that note,
And then this one is actually one that you recommended to me because you actually had purchased it for our library. In Her Hands, The Story of Sculptor Augusta Savage by Alan Schroeder and illustrated by Jamie Burrell, I guess. Again, another person that I didn't know about, born in Florida, loved working with clay and everything else, and then ended up being one of the bright lights of the Harlem Renaissance. And it was just a fascinating story. Again, I read it to the girls and they were like, is this true? Did this really happen?
the work and the perseverance.
Work and the perseverance. I mean, the fact that she won a contest and then took that money and got on a train from Florida on her own and came up to New York with
just a women of prayer.
A women of prayer and a talent.
Very talented.
And hoping that she could do something. And she had a letter of introduction to a sculptor who said he couldn't help her because he charged $10 a lesson, and she basically arrived in New York with like less than $10 in her pocket. But he wrote a letter for Cooper Union. And that's where,
the sculpting she did
the
overnight.
sculpting she did overnight. And the girls were totally fascinated with this, and she got into Cooper Union. She was also the first person that Cooper Union ever issued a scholarship to help with your living expenses. Because Cooper Union doesn't charge tuition, but you were always responsible for your living expenses. And she was going to have to leave because she couldn't keep the living expenses, and she was the first person that they ever issued a scholarship to. But she did 2 years worth of study in 6 weeks. That's the part that got me. I was like, oh my goodness. I mean, that's determination. And the sad part about it is when you read the epilogue, is that as she got older, she went into depression and everything else, and she destroyed a lot of her own work. So there's not as much of her work around as, there should be. But fascinating story.
Yeah, Augusta Savage. Well, that wraps up for us Black History Month, and then next month we're moving into Women's History Month, where we'll have more selections for you. And I want to just share a little bit from my mailbag, which came to me via Zetta Elliott. Ship of Souls is coming out, and I know I got an invitation to Zetta's launch party for the book Ship of Souls, so you'll be hearing a review from me on that one. Great job, Zetta. I always love reading her work. We also have some information from Arnold Adolph, the late Virginia Hamilton's husband, and he sent me some information on the Center for Multicultural Children's Literature, and he wants me to do some digging and research about what was done for children's literature 20 years ago. So this is not a new phenomenon that we're rebuilding and re-energizing when it comes to cultural revolutions in children's literature. It's something that has been in our past and something that I think we need to keep bringing to the forefront. So Arnold, thank you for sending this in to me. It is on my first agenda item as to where to go with it, and I thank you for your directions as to who to speak to and getting some interviews on the plate for that. So thank you so much, everyone, for watching. This is Bowllan's blog, and I thank you, Ms. Walsh, for our last installment of Black History Month. I also have another article on Jeremy Lin that you must absolutely read. It will be linked on this blog post. Thank you. Have a good day.